Hey folks, there's a big debate going on right now in the United States in particular about history. Wondering what it is we should be looking at, what it is we should be studying, how deep should we go, what should we consider to be the beginning, what should we consider to be the focal point of history. We have similar debates here in Canada as well. Mitch McConnell the other day sent a message to the Secretary of Education demanding that the 1619 project be removed from all suggested curriculum. Now, my understanding is that the federal government in the United States doesn't actually write individual schools' curriculum. They leave that up to the states and they leave that up to the school boards. Nonetheless, Mitch McConnell demanded that they remove the 1619 project from school curriculum. And his reason, to paraphrase, was along the lines of, we don't want our kids growing up believing that America is inherently evil. I get that. Nobody wants their kids growing up looking down at them, looking at them as though they've done something horrible. As parents, we don't want our kids to know every shameful thing we've ever done. We don't want them to lose respect for us. Which is exactly why I try to tell my kids as much as I possibly can about the mistakes that I've made in my life. Not because I want them to lose respect for me, but because I want them to be able to keep their own. I want them to be able to avoid making some of the mistakes that I've made. So when I'm talking to my daughter about her new credit card, I'm not speaking down to her. I'm telling her, yeah, I got a credit card when I was about your age for exactly the same reasons as you, with exactly the same way of looking at it. I'm going to pay this off every month, and I'm only ever going to use it in cases of emergency. Yeah, until that emergency became burgers at McDonald's, beer at the Hilltop Pub, beer at the Lunar Road, beer at whatever other pub I happen to be at it. Credit card quickly filled up with beer and pizza. But anyway, I'm not telling her that because I'm trying to diminish her. I'm not telling her that because I want her to think badly of me. I'm telling her that because I want her to know that I've made the mistakes that she may make. And she can learn from me rather than learning from her own experience. She can learn from my experiences. She can apply my life to her own. She can see where the pitfalls are and hopefully avoid them herself. My dad tried the same thing with me. It didn't work very well, but that's a whole other talk, isn't it? The bottom line is, we shouldn't be afraid of our history. I've said this countless times. On this channel, we shouldn't be afraid of our history. Our history is there to tell us something. The experiences of the past can inform our decisions in the future if we are aware of them and if we let them. And for what it's worth, this is a very Christian principle. As a matter of fact, it's one of the core principles that centers around our understanding of sin. We must see the sin in our life if we are to acknowledge that it is there and if we are to move beyond it. If we are to grow, we must see where those opportunities for growth lie. 1 John chapter 1. If we say we are without sin, we deceive ourselves. We have problems. We have experiences that we can look upon and grow from. We have made mistakes. If we don't acknowledge our mistakes, if we don't acknowledge the things that we wish we hadn't have done or the things we had done, we can't ever possibly move beyond them. Christians are called to be introspective. We are called to be willing to look inside, to look at what has gone on in the past. That is not to say we're called to live there. It's not to say that we're called to wallow in shame or guilt. We are not. But we must acknowledge that we've slipped up. We must acknowledge we've done bad things. We must acknowledge we are not perfect. we must acknowledge that we are not worthy of hero worship. Now, if this is true for the individual, and we believe it to be, we also must believe that it is important for the community, for the society, for the nations. Human beings have a wonderful desire not to teach about our past. We don't like sharing the crappy things we've done. History books have been written missing entire decades of the story because of what those decades were filled with. History books have been written with incredible perspectives missing because we don't want to talk about what happened on that day in that particular place. And yet we need to. That same biblical principle that says we must acknowledge who we are, what we've done, where we've been. We must acknowledge our story. We must acknowledge the things that we've messed up on in order to grow, in order to move beyond, in order to be redeemed. That same principle applies to our community. So when Mitch McConnell or any other politician, when any other elected official, when they say things like, we shouldn't be teaching this and this and this because we don't want our kids to think that we are inherently evil, Mitch McConnell is asking us to close our eyes to other truths. He's asking us to close our eyes to what was, to other perspectives, to other stories, to other experiences. He's asking us to see what was as the glory days, to see what was as something to be worshipped. He's asking us to take a journey that will lead us, that will continue to lead us down a road of ignorance. And for the Christians that are out there that may hear this, you know what happens when sin is left unattended. You know what happens when we don't deal with the sin in our life. It festers, becomes a toxin to our life, becomes incredibly destructive, and it leads to death. It leads to death of the soul, it leads to death of the identity and the being. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. I pray that as painful as our history may be, we won't be afraid of it. We'll recognize it as a journey of healing, a journey of redemption. A journey that will lead to us shining light into corners of our lives, of our collective lives, that will lead us into an even brighter, more loving, more inclusive, more just and equitable future. Amen.